Mike Wilson here, the host of the Stutter With Confidence podcast, and I'm excited today to be joined by Sherry Dongqi Bao. Sherry, and we're talking before this, and in the Western countries, you go by Sherry more, and when you're at home in China, you go by Dongqi more. But if you would, and I'll call you Dongqi because that's what I've known you as.
Okay.
Best.
Yeah.
So if you would just tell people where you live, or where you're from originally, and what you do.
Okay, sure. And also, like, thank you for hosting me. Mac. So I'm originally from China, and I'm currently a PhD student in Zurich, and I study neuroeconomics.
Neuroeconomics, that's interesting. So that's sort of how the human brain operates when it comes to dealing with economics, right?
Yes, and also like it's, so basically I think it's more broad. It also like includes some other topics, just like generally in neuroscience and cognitive science. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's interesting stuff. So we're trying originally, living in Switzerland now, and starting out, before we dive into other things, have you noticed differences in how, well, in the experience of being a person that stutters, living in China, and being a person that stutters living in Switzerland?
Actually, so in my native language, Chinese, I think my stuttering is more covert. So like most of people do not notice that I stutter. So from my experience, because I had it very well, people do not know that. So I had some experience which like people laugh at my stuttering, but it's not too much. So I cannot really say how it's like to stutter in Chinese culture. I do stutter much more in English, and I feel like it's more, I mean, people are generally nice to me, so I feel it's okay to stutter, but I do so I feel like it's still way to go for me to really accept that and to really do not struggle when I have a stuttering moment.
Gotcha. And this subject that you mentioned of not stuttering near as much when you're speaking in your native language and when you're in China is something that I've heard from some other Chinese folks who stutter also.
Yeah.
And something else I've heard is there's a lot of feeling like it's not okay to stutter in China, and that you should definitely not be stuttering. So there's perhaps added pressure to not be different. At least that's the perception of a couple folks from China that I've heard from. But the people are pretty successful coverts. A lot of Chinese folks who stutter are very successful at hiding it. And do you think, I mean, there's a lot of word changing that's going on, or why do you think, for you at least, it was easier to hide your stuttering? And not that I'm advocating that as a goal or an approach to hide our stutter, because I think the opposite is very useful when we're being open and honest about our stutter. But why do you think a lot of Chinese folks who stutter seem to have a lot of success being covert and hiding it when they're in China?
I think the main reason that we are more familiar with our native language, so we are more free to switch words, and also like try to like use some helping words. And also I feel like so the flow of Chinese and English is quite different. So like think in Chinese there are less syllables, so maybe that's also why so it's kind of natural to speak kind of slow in Chinese because there's less syllables, but in English it's more syllables, and I kind of always like have the feeling that I have to speak fast. I have to like speak perfectly fluent. So that's maybe also why I'm more nervous when I speak English. So my stuttering is more overt.
Gotcha. And obviously in your native language, you're going to have more, well, your skills in speaking that go back to when you first started
Yeah.
speaking. So they're gonna, anybody's gonna have deeper sort of language skills or feel more comfortable probably in their native language, or at least most people would.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so your childhood, are you like many of us, you have some challenging memories from your childhood surrounding your stutter, or if not, you were a very, we'll call it successful at hiding your stutter. Was hiding your stutter, was that a major part of what you were doing with your time in childhood?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I don't have any specific stuttering memories like before 8 or 7. But so one time when I read my diaries, like I wrote that like I think when I was 7, so in my diary I wrote that, so in the class I was afraid of the teacher calling me up. So I think although I don't have a very strong memory of that, I think during that time I do experience a lot of struggles. And I think as I get older, I'm also more experienced at hiding my stuttering. So I don't have any like memories of stuttering, of being laughed or something, but I do remember I struggle a lot, such as when like before I go to school in the morning, I will like pray for some kind of like God that I kind of created like for myself, that the teacher will not call me up or I will not stutter during the whole day.
Yeah, you're not alone on that. And a lot of us have prayed to a higher power that our stuttering would, would not be a huge problem for us. And as we go through life, and so this journal that you were keeping when you were 7 years old, I find to be interesting because many of us, including myself, don't remember our, stuttering being a problem, or even stuttering, and until we got to a certain age, which, for many people is like
Yeah.
8, 9, 10 or
Yeah.
so. And but in your case, you were keeping a journal. So even though you don't remember it when you were 7, being frustrated about your stutter, you've got evidence
Yeah.
there that you were. And, there's something I've heard from, well, Courtney Bird mentioned this when she was on the podcast, from the University of Texas at Austin, that actually, a lot of little kids who might not remember it later, that they were already frustrated about their stuttering when they were,
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, that she's definitely seen that. And her point is that the stuttering iceberg is already, for many kids, starting to form even before we remember caring or even being aware of our stutter. It was already
Yeah.
starting to form this idea that, stuttering was not okay, and that we should do everything we can not to stutter. And would you
Yeah.
say, even though you don't have those specific memories of, people discovering your stutter and laughing at you and making fun of you, would you say that you lived in fear of those moments happening at some point?
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah.
And that did that dominate a lot of your whole experience through those years of childhood, was trying, you know, praying and trying your best to hide it from the world?
Yes, I think so. I think I was always like living in fears. Yeah.
Gotcha. And when you got into adulthood, um, well, how old were you when you moved over to Europe?
I moved to Europe when I was 22.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you went to regular university back in China, and you can't
Yes. Yeah.
continue. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And how was your, well, that dynamic that we were talking about that was happening in childhood for you, that continued into your adult years, I assume?
Yeah, I think so. But I think I kind of feel like so actually before I go to Europe, I firstly had a research experience in Canada. And so that was the first time I began to live in a foreign country and using English as a like as a major language. So I think from that time I realized that I cannot hide my stuttering anymore. So that changed a lot. At the beginning, I was really depressed. I do not want to go to school. I just so I sleep very, very late, and I also get up very late. I do not want to go to school. And I also tried like several ways. I searched online for different resources, and I also tried to contact a therapy, but I think during that time, because I was just doing a pro, pro project in Canada, so I do not have too much salary, and I could not afford that, so I didn't like continue with that therapy. But I do really want to find some ways to really face it. So I do not want to hide it anymore. I want to really solve this problem. So I think that's the time like everything about stuttering began to change.
That's interesting. So, so the stutter, the physical stutter, the inability to hide it, if you will,
Yeah.
came out when you were being asked to go out and live your life in a language that were not already fully
Yeah.
fluent in, right?
Yeah.
And which I didn't even know until this conversation. I should have, but I didn't realize that there's actually more sounds in English than there is in the Chinese. Is it Cantonese or Mandarin? Is the
Yeah. Mandarin.
okay? That there's actually more. We'll call it more articulated positions and
Yeah.
more sounds in English. Okay.
Yeah.
That obviously, you didn't have as deep of a vocabulary, I would assume, in English, as you had in your native language.
Yeah.
And so that probably seemed like a really rude awakening and was it sort of like your deepest, darkest fear through all those years was finally fully coming out and it just felt horrible, I assume?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think that half year is kind of the darkest year. And also, I mean, um, the stuttering problem was not like solved immediately. So even if I began to like move to Europe for my master studies, things hasn't been changed. So I still live in that fear, but the fear is like I do encounter the stuttering moment every day. So it's not a fear anymore, but it's a kind of a shame on my face. Yeah. So yeah, so I still kind of live in that shame and fear for about 2 more years. Yeah, or 2.5. Yeah.
And when so at the end of that 2 or 2.5 years, was there something that started to change?
Yeah. So another thing started to change because that was when I prepared to apply for my for the PhD studies. And so I remember I attended a kind of a conference or something like a conference, and I wanted to talk to a professor and to ask her whether she will recruit new PhD students. And at that moment, I cannot speak out a single word. I managed to struggle out the things that I want to say, and after that, I just want to run away from her. I was really ashamed, and I realized that I do need to change this. So I think it will kind of affect my career. And so that's when I began to contact speech therapy in America, and I began to receive speech therapy.
Gotcha. And how long ago was that?
So I think that was in the end of 2018.
Gotcha. And so you got some speech therapy for a while? And
Yes.
And what was that? What was that experience like? And did it move the needle on your stuttering journey at all?
I wouldn't say it removed the needle at all. So I received the therapy for about more than 1 year, or about 1 year. I think the thing it changed me. I mean, it changed me most is that I began to do advertisement about my stuttering. So that was the first time I tell people that I stutter before my presentation. And I also, I also learned several skills, try to manage my stuttering, but it didn't work out pretty well. I think the most thing is that the thing it helped me most is that I began to admit that I'm a stutterer, and I tell people that I'm a stutterer.
Good stuff. And so you did that for about a year or so.
Yeah.
And then earlier this year, you had an experience. You had reached out and you joined my Stutter with Confidence program. And phase one, obviously I on this peer mentorship program, the whole phase one is about what you want to talk about your phase one experience and what you thought coming into it, and then what was your experience with it, and what was your impression of the whole experience of phase one?
Yeah, so before phase one, I could not sleep. I was really afraid, and I do not want to do that. But my partner encouraged me to do so, so I continued through this program, and I think that changed me a lot, because so before I really hide my stuttering, always tried to hide my stuttering when I talk to person, and also so I avoided to speak to strangers. So during phase one, I have to speak to strangers for a lot of times. So that really kind of built my confidence, and also make me more more brave. Yeah, so that's the thing that I changed a lot. So I think it helped me to also, for now, when I know that I will stutter, before I speak a sentence, I will say it anyway.
You'll just square up to that stuttering moment and still say what you want to say. So therefore you communicate, right? And remember, as we talk about, the whole point of talking is to communicate. And if we don't say what we want to say, or we don't say what we really have to say, then we're not communicating that thing, right? That communication is not occurring. But if we say what we want, we can still say exactly, we can still communicate exactly what we want to, even if it takes a little bit longer. And as you would say, as you mentioned, your bravery. As you know, I love hearing that, because becoming courageous and brave to say what we want, to be ourselves, whether we're going to stutter or not. If I have something to say and this is what I want to say, then this is what I'm going to say, and there's a certain confidence that comes from that, from developing that bravery and courage. And would you say that you also learn something about the way that other people are, that other people, really don't care near as much about the fact that I just stuttered as maybe I thought they would?
Yes. I think the most how to say, I think the best thing about this program is that we can learn from each other. I get to know a lot of people from this program, and I see like some people are really brave, and also they can also like say what they want to say, and be who they really are. I think that really encouraged me a lot.
Yeah, that bringing out who we really are so that we're no longer in some sort of a social prison where we walk through
Yeah.
life and, you know, not doing what we want, not saying what we want, not being who we want to be. That kind of unleashing of people's potential, in the eye contact also, which is a big part of what we do in phase 2, right? Which I'm noticing at times when you're seeing the stuttering wolf here as we're talking, I can see
Yeah.
that, like, you're not, over here, sometimes get a little bit of eye blinking, but you're coming back, you're staying in the moment, in the
Yeah.
communication. And we'll talk about your experience with making eye contact. In particular, what I'm talking about is in moments, in stuttering moments, right? Obviously it's easy to make eye contact when things are flowing, but in those,
Yeah.
historically for us, shameful, embarrassing, emotionally painful moments, talk about your experience with building up that habit of making eye contact with people.
Yeah, so I think at the beginning I kind of avoid looking at people, but through phase 1 I really learned to do that. So that changed me a lot. But I also feel like sometimes I still cannot control it, because I mean it's a habit. It takes time to change the habit. Yeah.
Right. And it's almost like a force of it can feel like a force of gravity, right?
Yeah.
Even though we don't have an eye impediment, right? We don't have an eye impediment, we have a speech impediment, but it can
Yeah.
really feel like there's some, force of physics, essentially, force of gravity that's pulling our eyes away from looking at people
Yeah.
in those moments. So it takes awareness. But
Yeah.
did you notice, like, at times when you do that, that that the stuttering moment is a different experience when you're looking at people as opposed to when you're not?
Yeah. So I think when I try to look at people, I do feel so I feel I'm more aware about my stuttering. I know what the kind of the stage it is on, and I could control it better. So I also feel like it also helps me to kind of like take my time to speak the words. Yeah.
Yeah. And, something I've experienced with that is I feel like people just show me much more respect when I'm looking them in the eye as opposed to when I'm not. And part of that is when I'm looking away, I have no idea how the person is reacting. No clue, right? Because I'm not looking at them. So our mind
Yeah.
tends to fill in the gap. Oh, they must have a terrible look on their face. They must think I'm an idiot. They must, be impatient. They must, whatever negative thing that we can project on them. But when we bring it back to where we're looking at people like that, you see what's happening with them. And normally, well, was that something that surprised you, Dongqi? Is that Were people more patient with you on those phase one? And for those that haven't sort of read between the lines here, on phase one, we just meet up, over Zoom. We meet up as a group first. We meet everybody in the group, and then I break people up into Zoom breakout rooms of 2 people each. And Dongqi's case, she was in Switzerland. Some of her practice partners were in India, we're in America, we're spread out around the world. But she was out speaking to people on the streets, and they were out in the mall or wherever where they could find people where they live. And so we just go out, and one person talks to somebody where they are, and the other person talks to somebody where they are, and the other person talks to somebody, and we just go back and forth. We just talk to people, and we ask them, random questions. Where's the bathroom? Where's the Starbucks? Whatever. We also tell them that we stutter, for example, excuse me, ma'am. And I'll use some deliberate fluency here, which is something we learn in phase 2 when we will learn the technique. But anyway, excuse me, ma'am, where's the bathroom? Just asking questions, right? And rather than having blocks, and in phase 1, there's no technique whatsoever. It's all about facing the stutter. And as I tell people in phase 1, if anything, I'd like you stuttering more than less, so that you have more to face, so that we can start this transformation from basically scared of stuttering, sort of scared. Well, to put it very bluntly, to go from scared little boys and girls to grown-up men and women when it comes to our stuttering, right? Fact is, we have a stutter. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But most of the world will listen to us. They will accept us. It'll be okay. But if we hold ourselves back, if we don't say the things we want to say, if we don't do what we want to do, well, then stuttering is going to dominate our life in a negative way, right? And so it's this whole idea of just facing those stuttering moments. And when we get out there, you realize, wow, the world's actually cooler than I thought they were going to be.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Right. And that's, as when we come back into the larger group and everybody talks about their experience, like everybody has that experience. Like, wow, I had no idea people were going to be this nice when I go out and stutter, And these are strangers who, didn't even know we were alive 1 second before we came up to them to talk to them. And so it's not like they're, trying to support us. They're just random people out there,
Yeah.
So, and would you say that experience of phase 1 really stuck with you? I mean, I'm not saying that it's, like you said, it's a work in progress, but would you say that had a permanent change on the way that, that you feel like you can face those stuttering moments, and in terms of what the world, what, random people, what humans think about stuttering, and that it's not near as laughable or as embarrassing or shameful, perhaps, as you thought it was?
Yeah. So I think phase 1 did change me a lot. So, as I said, so I began to, I will stutter even if I know that I will stutter. So yeah, I will speak the things that I really want to say. And I have less fear before I speak to strangers. Yeah.
And as far as your quality of life, like the extent to which fear of stuttering sort of impedes on your life, would you say that there's a result of what you just said that the quality of life has improved a good bit?
Yes, I think like I do. I think I accept more that I'm a stutterer. But I do think so because the kind of the practices in phase 1 and phase 2, most of them are about strangers. But I do feel connections with the people like your colleagues, your friends, and like the more familiar people. I think it's kind of more difficult for me. So I do think I still need to play more about the sports. Yeah.
To play more of the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And, you know, that radical honesty is very important, right? Bring them
Yeah.
in, bring people in to the sport that we're playing. And, I like to call it a full education disclosure. So, for example, say to people, and as we said, in phase 2, we learned a form of intentional or deliberate or skilled disfluency, if you will. And those are also some of the techniques that we use to have more control over it. And, on a few of your moments where the stuttering wolf has showed up in this conversation, I've seen you, for example, working through the block release where you go like that, and
Yeah.
work your way through it rather than struggling your way through it, right? Which is what
Yeah.
most of us would have done historically. We're not sure we have no idea what to do in that moment. So we're just like, either switch the word or not say it, or, struggle, right? That go like that, and obviously that depends on the person as far as the way they stutter. But
Yeah.
but we're getting back to the full education disclosure. So for people in my life, for example, the way I like to disclose is say, hey, I have a stutter, or if they already know it, say, hey, how I have a stutter. Well, sometimes you're going to see me stretch out some sounds like I'm doing right now, or so. Start some words and then pause like I'm doing right there. You see how I'm doing that? And people say, yep. And, and this is a part of the technique that I use. So you're going to see me do that. Sometimes you'll see me pause a little bit longer. And now I don't have to spend any time thinking, what are they going to think when I do these things, right? I've educated them on what to think on them. It's true. This is what's going on here. And I found that, I like to think of that as pulling people into my comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
But it comes back to that radical honesty. And so that's, something I encourage everybody to do is just put it all out there, very straightforward. And like you said, though, these are old habits competing against new habits, right?
Yes.
And old habits die hard. And we've been doing this for decades and decades. So it's totally normal that it's a work in progress. But the idea is to take a long-term view, right? You don't have to be, a Jedi Knight or a black belt overnight here. This is a work in progress. The most important thing, I think, in my opinion, in my own life and from what I've seen from others, both that have come in the program and outside the program, facing our fears and getting to the point where we say what we want, which it sounds like you're largely at that point now where if you want to say it, you say it. That, to me, that's the most important thing by far than the actual quantity of stuttering.
Yeah. think so.
So yeah, are there any uh, goals that you have? Say things that might have, well, what's your long-term uh, goal, if you have one at this point, with your, what do you want to do with your PhD in neurofinance?
So, so I just finished my first year of my PhD, and I started 2 projects. And I do wanna, so the projects turn out well. And so one thing about stuttering is that I do hope I could kind of like introduce my research to a broader to a broader audience, and also yeah, and also when I do the presentations, I will be more kind of free. Yeah, that's my goal. And also so maybe that's the long-term goal. The short-term goal about stuttering is I could, so one interesting I found about myself is that even if I tell people that I stutter, for 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 example, last time before I do a big presentation in front of about 40 of 50 people, I tell people that I stutter, but I do also, I mean, I still experience the struggles of stuttering. So it's like they already know that I stutter, but I still do not stutter, kind of unconsciously. So that's the short-term goal that I want to work on. Yeah.
So the getting more dialed in, if you will, where you're more where your fluency is more skilled, is sort of the way I'd like to describe it. Because I do think that chasing fluency, if fluency is what we're chasing,
Yeah.
that tends to be counterproductive for our mentality.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because I think in many of our minds, that's connected with, I just want to sound normal. I just want to sound normal. I just want to sound normal, which puts extra performance anxiety on the stuttering mind, where it's very hard for us. And so I like, to encourage you guys and myself, rather than chasing fluency, which is very tempting, right? Super tempting to just, hey, I just want to be, a normal fluent speaker. I just want to sound like that. But actually having that mentality, I'm going to show people some this fluency, but I'm going to do it in a skilled way on my terms, where I
Yes.
put the elephant on the table in a skilled way. And that's kind of ironic or paradoxical, but when we're doing that, and this goes back to that quote from Wendell Johnson, who's a famous person in the history of the stuttering world, that stuttering is what we do when we're trying not to stutter.
Yeah.
And so if we flip that on its head psychologically, where no, I'm trying to stutter, or I'm trying to be disfluent here, I am not trying not to stutter, but
Yeah.
I'm doing it on my terms. Well, that tends to lead to, and I don't even like saying the word, but much more fluency, much more control, where we become the maestro, or we become the captain of our speaking ship, rather than the stuttering wolf just sort of, knocking us around whenever he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was not aiming for fluency, but I was saying, so I cannot kind of let the stuttering moment go as it naturally goes, but I kind of still wanna make the moment shorter. I wanna kind of get out of that moment. So I think that's the goal that I wanna work on, is to like stay more naturally in that moment and also try to control it better.
Right. So, yeah, kind of rather than taking the bait of the stuttering wolf, right? And the moment comes up and we just naturally fall into that, trying to push that word out to struggle, and obviously with the approach that we use, we release that moment, right? So we
Yes, we release. Yeah.
do that, right? And
Yeah.
and as you've heard me say many times, I encourage all you guys to use the support group, right? Phase 3 of this Stutter with Confidence program is the rest of our life, because none of us are cured. No, there is no cure for stuttering. This is like staying in shape physically. The only way to stay in shape, stay in great shape physically for the long run, is to do what we got to do as a lifestyle, right? In order to stay in great shape. If you want to be able to go out and run a, 10-mile, 16 kilometers, whatever that is, race, and run it well, you got to be in shape for that. So this is the same sort of thing. And how do we keep our speech in shape for the long term? Well, we call each other. We use a support group, because since none of us are cured, nobody's wasting anybody's time, because we all need the practice, and including myself. And I can see it when I'm have 2-3 days where I don't really do any speaking to anybody program, or at least some good disciplined practice on my own. I'll feel the stuttering will start to nip at my heels more, right? He's always he's never dead. He's never dead. This is like, like Star Wars. The other side is never fully dead, because they always got to have another movie. And thinking of it like a sport, though, right? Where we don't want the opponent never to show up, right? Feel free to show up for the big speech, stuttering wolf, which is a very different mentality, right? Than that mentality that most of us had historically, which is praying, even though we didn't call it the stuttering wolf, praying that he would just not show up. You would forget about it that day and just not show up. Now it's like, no, bring it on. Let's do this. Let's play ball. You bring your A game, I'm going to bring mine, and let's do our thing. But even if you get the best of me, even if I stutter a lot, whatever, I'm still saying what I want. I'm still going to communicate what I want. So at the end of the day, you, the stuttering wolf, are not going to win this. You're not going to ruin my life. I have taken that power away from you, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I digress. All right, so this has been a great chat. Are there any? Well, one question that I like to finish on sometimes for people is, if you could speak to your younger self. So let's say you could speak to yourself, maybe before you started trying to hide in childhood, or maybe right before you moved over to Canada, when your stuttering, became much more severe, and when you were sort of hiding in your, hiding at home a lot. If you could speak to your younger self and give, a concise piece of advice for her, what would you share?
I don't know. I mean, so actually, I do think about one kind of question. It's like, if you have a pill, you take it and you will not stutter anymore. will you take that? I mean, if you are like, will you take that now? Or if you are, if you or already got that pill when you are really young, like 7 years old, will you take that as a younger self? I feel like as a younger self, I may not take that. So I will just stutter as who I am, because I feel if I do not stutter, I will not become the person I am now. For example, maybe I will not be interested in brain, and I will not choose the subject I want to study. I will not make make friends with the friends that I really love. I mean, stuttering let me help. I mean, it helped me find really precious people. Yeah, but if you ask me whether I want to take it now, maybe I want to take it. Yeah,
Because
because
you've
I
already,
already, yes, I already be like who I am. I think it will relieve things. I think we need to admit that it will like make things much easier. But as a younger self, I will not take that.
that's interesting. Now, if this was your younger self that I was sitting here talking to, you probably would take the pill at that time, right? However, you now, looking
Yeah,
back on your life as a whole and all the positive aspects, which ended up coming, from the life that you had, which was as a person that stutters, you would not advise your younger self to
yeah,
take the cure, right?
yeah,
Because you wouldn't be you now if you didn't have all
yeah,
these experiences.
yeah,
That's the same way I feel. Um, that I wouldn't be the person I am if I didn't have all these stuttering experiences. And I guess that's stating the obvious, and it's a key part of this is that we have to now love who we are, right? Or like how things have turned out in our life with our friends. And I know what you're saying with friends. I probably would have a different, I can almost guarantee it. I'd have a different set of good friends over the course of my life if I never had the stutter. And, maybe they would be great friends too, but maybe they wouldn't be as good of friends as I have. And
yeah,
and so yeah, I totally hear you. And in terms of the pill, I mean, it's a fun hypothetical conversation, but of course, that pill doesn't exist. Uh,
yeah,
and I, for one, am skeptical that it will ever exist. And I don't say that to be negative, but you know, um, studying the brain is very, very complex, and
yeah,
it's um, there oftentimes are it's multifactorial, right? There can be a genetic basis in this case with stuttering, and there usually is from what we know in 2021, most folks that stutter probably do have a genetic basis for it, although not all. And then there's some folks that have the genetic basis for it that do not grow up to stutter. And we all know how random it can be from day to day or month to month or year to year. So it seems unlikely to me that we're ever going to crack that code fully. But, you know, like there's this, well, like we'll probably never have a pill. And, you know, again, I'm a 2021 human. So what do I know about 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now? I don't,
yeah,
but it seems to me unlikely that there'll ever be a cure for getting out of shape. I mean, you may have a pill that helps you melt off weight at some point that's safe, but is that going to get your lungs in great shape so you can go run those those 10 miles, I doubt you'll ever be in shape for running unless you're running, that sort of thing, right? So,
Yeah.
but anyway, we digress from stuttering. Are there any, we're coming to the end of the time here, Dongqi.
Okay.
Are there any last thoughts or any things that we didn't get to that you want to share or talk about?
Yeah, I have a thought. So I think after this talk, when you upload this to YouTube, I think I will watch it. But it's also the first time I really watch my watch myself stutter. So I think it would be another challenge for me.
I
Yeah.
hear you. I hear you. And now that you mentioned that, I may add some of that onto the program so that people do get that experience of watching themselves. Because I think it's important to realize, to watch ourselves and to realize, look, well, first of all, that's another form of facing it, right? Where you're saying, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I look like. And I will say, in my experience and my opinion, it's much less stressful on the listener. Not that that's the top priority, of course. The priority is to say what we want, but it's certainly easier to watch. It's more comfortable to watch when someone is struggling less, right? So that is a lot less uncomfortable on the listener than that. Right.
Yes.
And again, to reiterate, they're both okay. I encourage everybody to say everything you want, no matter how much you're going to struggle, say it, say it, say it. That's most important. But it's certainly nice both on our end and on the listener's end, just to facilitate the communication if, hopefully there's less struggle on our end. So you've done fantastic. You've shared the points you want to share here. Dongqi, you smiled a lot. You made a lot of really smart points. So I hope that you enjoy watching yourself and you're proud of it, as you should be. So,
yeah. Okay, great.
Great talking to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mike.